Everyone who's an NBA fan has idolized certain players growing up, whether it's because they create the most buzz, maybe they're the best player from your local team, or perhaps they're even the best player in the entire league. Whatever that reason is, we all have one player who has inspired us to love the NBA, and these players have the responsibility of being a good role model. However, some of these athletes play as the greatest villain instead. In this series, we will take a look at some of the NBA's most despised players, whether it's because they didn't get along with teammates and coaches, or concerning off-the-court issues that cause fans to turn on them. I will review why this player is hated, share stories from other players and coaches about them, and determine whether the criticism is fair or not. But real quick, if you guys like this series and want to see more of it, drop a like so I know, and I'll make more videos like this in the future. And if you're new, please hit that subscribe button with post notifications turned on. It is completely free and it literally just takes 1 second, so you guys can be up to date on all my new videos. But without further ado, let's discuss today's player. The NBA in the 80s is remembered for the Lakers and Celtics dynasties, as at least one of them made the finals every year, with the Lakers coming away with 5 titles and the Celtics winning 3. The 90s is remembered for the dominance of Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, as they made 6 finals appearances and didn't lose a single time. However, what's not brought up as often is that there's one team wedged in between those eras who stopped all 3 of these dynasties from adding to their collection, and that team was the Detroit Pistons. Now, the Pistons didn't quite have the star power of the Lakers, Celtics, and Bulls, but what they did have was a lot of depth and a vicious style of defense that led them to having a top 5 defensive rating for 5 consecutive seasons. And at the forefront of all of that was none other than Bill Laimbeer. Fans and other players around the league outside of Detroit couldn't stand Laimbeer, as he was famous for instigating fights and violently fouling his opponent regardless of whether they get hurt or not. But something that's actually a little bit overlooked is how good Laimbeer actually was. He used his size and physicality to be a dominant force on the glass, as he averaged a double-double for 6 consecutive seasons, including 1986 when he led the league in rebounds, recording over 13 a game. During that same stretch, he made 4 All-Star teams with averages of 16 points and 12 rebounds a night. He was even one of the NBA's first stretch bigs, as he averaged 32% from deep for his career. And that may not sound all that great, but you have to remember that three-point shooting had yet to evolve in the 80s, and the league average was never higher than 34% in Laimbeer's playing days, and most of the time the average was around 30%. But despite this, numbers will never be the first thing you think about with Bill Laimbeer. What we will remember are the stories and how Laimbeer became one of the NBA's most hated players. So let's get into some of these stories. Number 1. Bill Laimbeer versus Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics. It's Game 2 of the 1985 Eastern Semifinals, and after the Celtics won Game 1, the Pistons badly needed a win in Game 2. We pick up in the third quarter when the Pistons, down by 4, give the ball to Laimbeer, who turns around for a jump shot and clocks Bird with his elbow, which was called for an offensive foul. A few minutes later, towards the end of the third quarter, Laimbeer gets the ball down low and goes up for the layup, once again knocking Bird down with his elbow. This time, however, it was enough to make Larry start bleeding at the jaw. He could have exited the game after that, but I think we all know that wasn't who Larry Bird was. Instead, he goes right down the other end of the court and immediately scores on 2 defenders. Then in the fourth quarter, he erupted for 17 points and led the Celtics to victory, scoring 42 points total on 14 of 26 shooting. So, moral of the story, don't mess with Larry Bird, because he will make you pay, and on this night, Laimbeer and the Pistons surely had to pay the price. Number 2. Bill Laimbeer versus Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics, again. Apparently, Bill didn't quite get the message, as just 2 years later, in Game 3 of the 1987 Eastern Conference Finals, things were pretty physical for the entire game, but it culminated in the fourth quarter when Bird pump-faked Rodman and was suddenly tackled by Bill Laimbeer, knocking him straight on his back. Bird then immediately starts punching Laimbeer on the ground before the fight was broken up and both men would be ejected from the game. But not before Larry got just one more shot in. The Pistons would go on to win this one, but after the game, Laimbeer claimed the fight wasn't his fault, saying he was just trying to break his fall. But that couldn't seem further from the truth. there's no reason for Laimbeer to grab Bird the way he did, and it looked like he grabbed him simply to take Bird down to the floor with him. If this happened today, Laimbeer would have probably been suspended for at least 1 or 2 games, and he should consider himself lucky that he wasn't. Or maybe not, because just 2 games later, Laimbeer was boxing out Robert Parrish for a rebound and pushed him with his elbow just a little bit too aggressively, and Parrish would retaliate.
Nice play by Darren Day. It doesn't fall. The tip by Parrish. He can't get it to fall, and Parrish takes Laimbeer to the ground.
And not to pile on Laimbeer and the Pistons anymore, but this also happened at the end of that same game.
Give the ball to Detroit. Bird steals it. Johnson, layup, Boston, 1 second left.
Number 3, Bill Laimbeer versus Michael Jordan and the Bulls. Now, this rivalry wasn't quite as personal as the one he had with Bird, because Jordan had beef with just about everyone on the Pistons, mainly Isaiah Thomas, which I have touched on in a previous video. Check that one out if you haven't already. But there certainly was still tension between the two. Now, Jordan has always known what kind of player Laimbeer was, but didn't truly experience it for the first time until the '88 playoffs, when Laimbeer set a questionable screen that Jordan aggressively tried pushing through, which caused Laimbeer to start a shoving match with Jordan. But that was just the beginning. What really set everything off was when the Jordan rules became publicly known in 1989. For those of you who don't know what the Jordan rules were, it was basically a defensive scheme to solely stop Jordan by playing aggressively when he was on the ball and knocking him down if he tries to drive inside. And Laimbeer was the main guy who would knock Jordan down. Throughout the '89 playoffs, Laimbeer was an absolute menace. Like in Game 1, when he unnecessarily threw a ball at Scottie Pippen at the end of the quarter, or in Game 3 when he pushed MJ for no apparent reason. But my favorite moment was at the beginning of Game 6, when Laimbeer knocked Pippen out with his elbow while trying to grab a rebound. Pippen laid unconscious on the floor for the next 2 possessions before the Bulls were able to call a timeout. However, over the next 2 possessions, Jordan got some revenge for him.
They'll calm you down, they'll work their plays, steal, he kept it in bounds, here it is again. Oh!
A flawless move from Jordan, because he knew Laimbeer was going to take him out if he didn't spin around him. But nonetheless, Detroit still closed out the series in this one, and they would go on to win the 1989 NBA Finals. So I guess you can say Laimbeer had the last laugh. For that year anyway. Number 4, Bill Laimbeer's streak. You would think that a man who was involved in as much chaos as Bill Laimbeer was, that he must have been suspended for a lot of games, but that wasn't the case for Bill. Laimbeer proved to be one of the NBA's greatest Ironmen, playing all but 11 possible games prior to his retirement 1 month into the '94 season, including a 7-year streak of 685 consecutive games played. The streak only came to an end in 1989 when Laimbeer and Brad Daugherty were both suspended for a game after getting into a fight while Laimbeer was boxing out Daugherty for a rebound. It looks to me like Bill instigated it by grabbing Brad's neck, which Daugherty responded by pushing Laimbeer, thus leading to the fight. Regardless, Laimbeer's streak came to an end, but it's remarkable that it was even that high to begin with, as only 4 other players in NBA history have a streak longer than Laimbeer's. Number 5. Laimbeer's tactics, dirty or clever. Even though it's pretty clear that Bill Laimbeer was a dirty player, I think there's a decent argument that he mainly acted this way because it was going to give his team the best chance to win. You see, Laimbeer wasn't a very athletic player, but he made up for that with his fierceness and drive to win by any means necessary. Laimbeer even said himself that he doesn't fight, he agitates and then walks away. Even though Laimbeer was definitely downplaying how far he took it, he's not entirely wrong. For example, let's go back to his incident with Bird in '87. I know Laimbeer was in the wrong for this and he could have severely hurt Larry when he tackled him to the ground, but what did this eventually lead to? It led to both men getting ejected and the Celtics lost the game. Granted, the Pistons were up by 16 heading into the 4th, meaning a comeback was unlikely anyway, but there was no chance the Celtics would be able to pull it off without Larry Bird, thus solidifying the win. Also, after getting knocked out by Robert Parrish in Game 5, when Laimbeer woke up, the first thing he asked was if Parrish had been ejected, because all he cared about was getting the best chance he could to win. I think former Mavs coach Richie Adubato described Laimbeer the best when he said he's intelligent, he's dirty, he's a great actor, I think he's a fierce competitor, and I think he's a winner. To sum it up, he's a guy that everyone hates. I think that just about sums up who Bill Laimbeer was as a player, someone who won at all costs and is undoubtedly the dirtiest player in NBA history, thus making him one of the NBA's most hated players. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. My name is T Pointer. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.